Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Wind Waker Unflooded. Boy, do I have a treat for you. Oh, once again, I'm so excited to be back. I haven't done these modeling videos in a while, and it's just, I've already done one more. This is my second one now after the hiatus, and it's so nice to be back working on this project again. I mean, there's so many reasons that I do this, and it's just, part of it is just, it's such a peaceful place Hyrule is, and I love Wind Waker's aesthetics. And I mean, like I say, Hyrule being a peaceful place. Y'all that know your Zelda lore, are like, Joe, what are you talking about? Hyrule peaceful? Y'all know what I'm saying. It's nice just to have a reason to delve into these beautiful aesthetics artistically, and just immerse myself in that setting, right? And it's so nice. To me, it's Wind Waker is one of the most beautiful games graphically to have ever been made. And it's tough, right? Like, I know there's a lot of nostalgia there, but I can't deny that, like, that's my perspective. It's based upon experience, but it's also like based upon like artistic truth. I keep coming back to Wind Waker, and it's a game that I always find beautiful. And I don't think that's true with every game that I play. There's games that I cherished as a young person that I come back to and I go, oh, like, that's not how I remembered it looking, right? It's different. It's worse. But Wind Waker is a game that, like, to me, it never falters, even when I come back to it without the rose-colored glasses, right? But anyway, welcome back to Wind Waker Unflooded, a 3D modeling project where I am reimagining Hyrule in the world and art style of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Today we are working on Koholint Isle, or Eventide Isle, whichever you prefer to call it. But I'm leaning towards, I mean, there's aspects of both, right? Because there's a lot of details from Koholint, from Link's Awakening, that I'm not bringing in. Like, there's like the specifics. And part of it is like, because, spoiler alert for Link's Awakening, that world exists within a dream. So there's things that, like, I can't take its version of the island literally, right? Like, there's things that I'm like, I don't know that there was an animal village, right? Like, I don't know, like, what's there on the island. So I wanted to go for a more like naturalistic approach, and I might add some details later, but I'm just kind of going ahead and letting you know my approach artistically. I realized with my last video, it's like I felt like I talked about everything but the location I was modeling in that video until the end. I just did a video on Labrena, putting that in Hyrule. Thank you to Dr. H3MP for modeling Labrena and getting started on that. Really excited about that. But in this video, like, I just didn't talk about that until the end of the video. But here, I want to go ahead and talk about Link's Awakening and Labrena, or not Labrena, but Koholint Island, and the take that I'm going for as it could actually exist maybe within the world of Hyrule. Because I believe that Link landed on a real island, but that doesn't mean that what we see in the game was like the reality within Hyrule. And it's like that, it's not a useless debate, because you're like, well, it's within a game anyway. So, like, what is quote unquote reality within the game, and then what is the thing that we're presented, and what's the difference between those? And that's kind of a big question sometimes, right? And it's hard to, right? If I can teach a new word to y'all, some of y'all might know this word, but it took me a while to learn it until like a couple years ago. But if I may talk about the diegesis of the project, right? Or like that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? Like, diegesis basically refers to the elements that exist within the reality of a piece of media versus the elements that exist just for the audience. Like, for example, like in a film, dialogue is diegetic, but the soundtrack is non-diegetic, right? The soundtrack is still something that exists for the audience and is part of the edit of the film, and is presented with as much seriousness as the dialogue is, but it doesn't exist for the characters in the film. So, yeah, just talking about the diegesis of Link's Awakening, what is meant to exist for Link within the dream, and then what actually exists within the world of Hyrule? That is, I think, an interesting question that, maybe it will never really know the answer to, but I don't know. Like, it's just an interpretation, right? So much of this project is just interpretive, and I really enjoy that. I love how creative Wind Waker Unflooded allows me to be, and just like, I think that's the fact, right? It's just, it relies on just like, sometimes you just have to make a decision and have a take on these kinds of creative decisions within the world, and I think that's fun. I think it's a lot of fun to kind of figure those things out and make decisions about the lore and the creative decisions and try to figure that all out. But Anyway, I'm really excited about this. I think it turned out really well, given, or at least like relative to some of my other 3D models. Because sometimes it's like I don't always get it first try, and I make things in the map in the project that I'm like, all right, like I'll come back and fix that later and add more detail later. But this is something that's like, okay, I can walk away from this for a while. And I think just because I'm more focusing on the natural elements, focusing on the terrain, and like completing that, and I'm kind of like, well, I don't know that Mabe Village would exist at this point in the timeline, or that it existed for real at all within the world anyway. I don't know, right? Like, and like some of these characters in Koholint seem to be based on Link's memories of characters from Hyrule. So it's like I don't know that anything. I don't know that there were ever any people living on that island. I don't know, and that's just interpretive. I have no idea. Comment down below your interpretations of Link's Awakening, what you think was in the dream and what you think was quote unquote real. I think it's a really interesting question. I love Link's Awakening. It's such a charming game. I love the remake too. And I think it captured something I didn't expect it to, because I mean this is part of remakes, right? Is that like sometimes they have their own, like it's not just making things HD, but it's like they have to make creative decisions when they add more granular detail, right? If they take something 2D and make it 3D, they have to make a decision about like what the original was trying to go for. And I think the Link's Awakening remake is interesting because I think that's something that like there's levels of interpretation that you could have, right? Like I think if you played Link's Awakening originally on the Game Boy or Game Boy Color, you could have imagined the graphics of A Link to the Past or even Ocarina of Time as like this is what the developers were going for, right? I mean, Ocarina of Time wasn't out yet, is my understanding. But it's like you could have imagined that like, you know, like it exists on the Game Boy, but maybe the artistic intent was that it was a more serious world, and that's just an interpretation. And I don't necessarily think that's true. And I think the remake, like I wasn't like expecting an Ocarina of Time style, but like I think like I wasn't expecting that like toy style that the remake has, and I love it. I love how charming it is. Like it goes beyond like the Link Between Worlds like 3D art style, and then like pushes it further. And I love that. I love the A Link Between Worlds aesthetic, and I love pushing that into the Link's Awakening remake aesthetic, right? And I think that's a really neat creative decision for the remake to take, right? And I think it's interesting, right? Like Ocarina of Time's remake, in many ways holds true to the original, but there are creative decisions there too, as things are reinterpreted, as characters are remodeled, and as textures and lighting is recolored. To me, that's the biggest difference. And I'm not sure that I always agree with it. But it's also like based on the manual art of Ocarina of Time, all of the artwork and posters, like the 3D version looks like that art. It's just like there's the original game for the N64 has more muted tones, right? There's almost like a more realistic lighting and color style, right? That feels like you're looking through an actual camera because of how muted some of the colors are, right? Like it has a filmic quality, while the remake on the 3DS has a more like fantasy quality. Things are brighter, more colorful, and I think that that's a really interesting difference. And like to me, it's like I think the remake is graphically better in almost every way, but that creative difference is something that I'm like, I just wonder if the color scheme of the original, I think in some ways at certain times I prefer it. Not in every case, but most of the time. And I feel it most like on the title screen. There's a way that the Ocarina of Time original title screen feels, where it's somber and nostalgic, and the 3DS title screen for Ocarina of Time, it's like it's almost too colorful, right? There's that melancholy aspect that still exists in the music and, you know, in the cinematic presentation, but there's just something about like the color scheme of the original with the way that it paints like that sunset, that just like feels so unique to it, and I don't think is perfectly replicated by the 3DS version. And I think it could have been, but I don't know. Like to me, like that's not something I'm pitching a fit over. I'm not complaining. It's just like things can be lost in translation, but things can also be gained in translation. And I think Link's Awakening is a really interesting instance where I was like surprised by the remake. And then as I played more of the game, I was like, no, this totally fits, especially for the themes of the game. And it kind of like, it's interesting that like the Link's Awakening remake has like, it starts with like an anime style cutscene and ends with an anime style cutscene where you see like Link drawn out like an anime cartoon, right? And then it transitions from that as he arrives on Koholint and gameplay starts to that like toy-like aesthetic. To me, that translates like going from reality to the dream, and I think that works really well. But anyway, I'm just rambling. But I love Link's Awakening. I think it's such a cool game. I love all the Zelda games, but it's just so unique and stands on its own. And I would love more Zelda games like it, right? That just kind of like stand on its own, show just like a unique, like singular adventure. Like, and I don't know, like I love how epic Zelda games can be. I love that Tears of the Kingdom lets you live that giant epic fantasy again, and you can take on Ganon, and it's epic. And there's, you know, like the monsters are bigger and badder than ever, and it's all of Hyrule is at stake and in danger, and I love that. But like, you know, I don't feel the need to protect Hyrule in every game, and that's why I wish they were doing more 2D Zeldas, because I think the 2D Zeldas are like a great way to say like, hey, like the 3D Zelda games can be big and epic. The 2D Zelda games can be more singular adventures that aren't necessarily about the fate of the world, right? But anyway, I don't know. Like I wish that that there were more 2D Zelda games or more spin-offs in general. I mean, like, you know, like I say that, and like I've been happy within the past couple of years. Like the Hyrule Warriors games really scratched that itch. I'm really glad that those were coming out. All of the Hyrule Warriors, or both of the Hyrule Warriors games, right? Age of Calamity, and the original Hyrule Warriors. Like I thought that was, you know, quite the treat. And I'd love more Hyrule Warriors games and more other kinds of spin-offs. I love that Cadence of Hyrule came out. I guess I would love more stuff like, you know, from back in the day when like the Capcom was making their games, right? And it's like I would love like another like Minish Cap style like one-off 2D Zelda game, or like the Oracle games that exist kind of in their own settings, or Link's Awakening that exists in its own setting, right, in its own kind of micro adventure. But I don't know. I think the Zelda series can be so many things, and there's so many things that I want from it. But I love that it can do it all. I think it's a game series that is super ambitious, and it's not just about a singular thing. And that makes it hard sometimes. And like if you want to ask like what is a Zelda game about, you know, is there something that the series as a whole is about? I think there are, but like also each game has its own priorities and has its own aboutness. But anyway, I think it's about time to wrap up the video, y'all. I'm really excited about how Koholint Island turned out. It was a lot of fun to model it in 3D and figure out the egg and how tall the mountain should be. And to me, it's like I love the Wind Waker's art style, and I think the textures work really well for realizing this little island. But it's so nice to like be back and be modeling again. Comment down below what other locations you want to see me model, any other ideas you have for the world of Wind Waker Unflooded. Once again, I am 3D modeling the world of Hyrule as it could have existed within the world and art style of The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. So yeah, comment down below your feedback, any ideas that you have. I'd love to read them. But without further ado, I'll let you go. Now, if you're looking for other ways to support me, as always, you can support me as a creator by becoming a member on Patreon. There you'll get access to all kinds of exclusive behind-the-scenes content like in-progress outlines, scripts, storyboards, rough cuts, and even soundtracks for my newest films. By becoming a member, you'll also be thanked in the credits for any film I finish during your membership. You can also support me by streaming my music. I compose all of the scores for my own short films, and you can listen to those soundtracks on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to music. Just look up Joe Kendrick. That's JoeKendrick. Y'all have a wonderful day, and without further ado, I'll let you go.